Hi, it's Arjun, coming to you live from the Middle East, where I'm on a trip hosted by Columbia's Center on Global Energy Policy, where I'm an advisory board member, and we're actually midway through the trip. And I'm gonna have to keep this video short. We're actually between meetings and the schedule is pretty tight. We've so far visited Abu Dhabi, Dubai. I'm actually calling you from Riyadh, and we've got 2 more stops along the way. And we will at some point provide some longer term takeaways. I really just want to hit 3 quick topics this week. The first on oil, the second on China, and the third on kind of thoughts on other resources and the perspectives that are coming from the region. I think first on oil, the first basic question has to be, when you go to visit the Middle East, do you come away feeling better or worse about the oil macro? And I'm going to say we're coming away feeling better. And I think many of you know our view. We've not believed in the oil glut. We have thought there could be some near-term softness, but that the fears of a multi-million barrel a day oversupply are massively overstated. And especially as we get towards 2026 and into 2027, the prospects for a better, stronger demand and perhaps a tighter supply market was in the offing. And we're coming away feeling very good about those views. I think first on demand, I think everyone knows our view. We've called it obliterating peak oil demand. We simply have just not agreed with the narrative that anyone can know what decade, let alone what year, oil demand is going to peak. We've seen some updates from the major energy agencies, some of the big oil companies that produce forecasts, as well as other notable street analysts that are pushing to their right their forecasts for peak demand. But we'd say when you have 7 billion people who are using just a fraction of the energy that the lucky 1 billion of us do, I don't know how anyone can come up with these forecasts that oil demand is going to peak by some round 5-year number increment, as you continue to hear out there. And certainly being in the region, it's really hard to be in an area that is undergoing massive transformation and not come away feeling good about the demand picture. I think we also are remembering back to the time 20 years ago, as China and BRICS were starting to take off and that super cycle was just getting underway. It took everybody by surprise, both the major oils, the independent producers, most of the street, but frankly, folks from this region as well. No one was really forecasting that type of major upturn. And so I think some of the feelings about maybe a complacency around supply, questions on what degree should one invest, maturity of legacy fields, all those kind of normal things that we talk about with our Western oil industry. It's not like it's untrue here as well. It's not like there is while there is a near-term ramp going for previously OPEC spare capacity that had been kept in the ground. If demand is going to be as healthy as we think it's going to be over the coming decade plus, we're going to need new forms of supply. And the question really is, when does that kick in? Our best guesstimate has been that as the power and AI supercycle takes hold, you're going to start seeing even better oil demand numbers. Maybe we get a re-acceleration of GDP growth, into 2026, 27, 28 in the years ahead, back towards the kind of better numbers we saw much earlier in my career. And that can be the spark to really lifting oil and the oil sector out of its malaise. So again, we're here in the region right now. We come away feeling sort of as good, if not better, about our especially our medium and longer term, more constructive view of the oil sector in general. The second big topic we want to discuss in China, and I think a theme that has come up in every city we visited and in just about every meeting, is what is going on with the US versus China and some of those trade tensions and such things, as well as how do we think about China's manufacturing dominance. And it's really a major theme, and I think a major shift in how we in the world have thought about China, especially relative to 20 years ago during the China BRICS expansion. From that period, it was about China moving up economic S curves, using a lot more energy, using a lot more copper and all those kind of things. And it was obviously very much a commodity super cycle as their demand surged. They're now turning these very high levels of commodities demand that they're at right now into absolute manufacturing dominance. And I think people have been very familiar with it in some of the other sectors, whether that's steel or aluminum and such things. And of course, we're now seeing it in the energy space via the fact that their electric vehicle manufacturing capacity is well in excess of their domestic demand. And that's also true in terms of solar and some of their renewables value chains as well. And what does that mean for energy overall? What does it mean for oil markets? What does it mean for US versus China? It probably is going to be one of the defining themes. I think everyone knows we push back hard on that net zero kind of zero-sum game mindset, that there's some fixed amount of wealth and there's some fixed amount of energy used, and therefore we got to transition out of this stuff and only go into this other stuff. It does not have to be, and I don't think it will be zero-sum. Take, for example, the obvious need in the United States, that we probably went too far with things like NAFTA and the WTO ascension of China in 2002, to the point that we really hollowed out our manufacturing base. Now, between the Biden administration, the Trump administration, we have some sort of back and forth policies on how to go about it, but it is something we're going to have to go about. Are we going to reshore everything? Of course not. But the idea that we're going to reshore nothing also doesn't make sense, and we believe that that will be stimulative. You can already start to see it in some of the power generation numbers. I think it could be stimulative for US GDP. I think another example we've cited is China's excess capacity in things like electric vehicles and renewables and solar panels and such things is almost certainly stimulating overall economic growth in the developing world. And we think that is positive for global GDP. If it's positive for global GDP, it's positive for all forms of energy, but included in that would be traditional areas like oil and natural gas, as well as all the new areas, whether that's nuclear, renewables, and so forth. And so I think this whole question of China's manufacturing dominance and what does it mean, I feel like people, especially when it comes to traditional energy, have a little bit of a pessimistic view of it. When it comes to US versus China trade battles, people have a little bit of a pessimistic view of it, and I'm not sure that that's accurate. And I think the competition, it's going to lead to things like permitting reform, of infrastructure build out, and these kind of things in the developed world. And in the developing world, they need investment, they need energy. If they get more energy, it's good for their economic growth, it's good for their energy demand growth, and we're gonna, it's gonna be an ongoing theme, but our sense is it deserves a much more positive spin, a much more optimistic spin than this kind of, death match between the US and China is otherwise being made out to be. The last area I want to touch upon, which has also really been striking in just about every meeting we've had, is that not only do people sort of ask about oil and US, China, and these kind of things, but there are a lot of questions on natural gas and renewables in both areas. It's never one versus the other, and certainly in the US, unfortunately, these sources of energy supply have somehow become partisan and divisive. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'll tell you, it is encouraging to see that here in the Middle East, it's not being viewed as one or the other. They're going to need both. There's clearly a need here, just as we see in the US, to build out power generation. I think people obviously know it's a very solar-rich area in terms of solar radiation. So unlike, say, Northern Europe, probably makes sense here. You pair it with some batteries, you do some natural gas. To the extent that you were previously burning oil for power generation, that now frees up that oil for export. It's a good, positive trade for countries in the region. Saudi Arabia is most obviously pursuing that type of strategy. And it just doesn't have the divisiveness that it does in our country. You're going to need both. It is really bizarre that people think either natural gas or renewables is kind of the answer. Why can't we be more perhaps like this region, where almost every company and official we've met with have really talked about natural gas and renewables in tandem. And it's interesting and I think exciting to see. So we'll end this video on a personal note. And I'm realizing that since COVID hit in 2019, I've been outside of the country, but it's mainly been to Europe and probably some typical US vacation spots in Mexico and, related areas. I've not actually been to a country undergoing transformation. And I'll tell you, between the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and now Riyadh, the palpable sense of growth and excitement and the future and development, we need more of that in the United States. I hope, whether it's this AI-powered race, whether it's the need for permitting reform, whatever it is, some semblance of this we can harness. Before coming here, last week I was in DC and I took the Acela, from New York Penn Station down to Washington, DC. Like, it's the same Acela I rode 30 years ago at the beginning of my career. Why can't we have bullet trains in the tri-state area, in that northeastern corridor? The next gen Acela was a joke. It was basically just an unmuddied up version of the older train. There was nothing next gen about it. Why can't we have more distinct architecture? Some really cool buildings here, by the way. And I'm in Riyadh. Imagine, I wish I took in some video in Dubai of the buildings there, but this sense of growth and investment in the future and doing better for your people. We could use more. We got LaGuardia, I guess, is new. Terminal A at Newark is new. I feel like we could do a lot better, and I kind of people need to come to these areas that are under development. It's exciting, it's fresh, it's new. We could use more of it in the United States. Thank you.